If we look at funerals were at 50 people maximum. Now we are moving the funerals to 100 people. That's the maximum. But if your venue is small and cannot take 100 people at 1.5 meters apart, then you must use half the capacity of that venue. So I hope that is very clear, that 100 is the maximum, irrespective of the venue size. But if the size is small, then you use half the capacity of that venue. And the night vigils will remain as they are. They are still not permitted. And when we come to the health protocols, they are still the same at funerals. 1.5 meters apart, the mask must still be on, sanitizing, and we must keep to those because we know that funerals are super spreaders, because people, the activities at the funeral, like singing, people consoling one another, it means that the chance of spread is higher. So we must keep to the health protocols. And of course, we still have to wear masks across the board. When you leave your house, you wear a mask. When you enter a building, the owner of the building must ensure that you are wearing a mask. Whether it's a mall or a government building or a private company building, you must wear a mask. That is a must. Sometimes we see that people think now that we're at level 2, we must relax. Sometimes they don't wear their masks. We must still wear our masks and wear them properly, covering the mouth and nose. And of course, the other gatherings that have been now really the restricted are now released. It's the faith gatherings. The faith gatherings, as you know, were only allowed 50 people with the social distancing, washing of hands, and a whole lot of directions. Now that is changing. Now a maximum of 250 people are allowed in the venue for the faith gatherings. It doesn't matter how big the venue, the maximum inside the venue is 250. But if the venue is too small to accommodate 250 people at 1.5 meters, then it must be less. It must be half the size of that venue. I will repeat that. The maximum you can get in a venue is 250. Or less if your venue is small and cannot accommodate 250 with the social distancing. So if your venue can't allow the social distancing, then you cannot have 250. You'll have to have less than 250. And of course, that goes for other gatherings, whether it's social gatherings inside the venue, the maximum is 250 at 1.5 meters apart, or less if the venue is small. And if the venue is small, you can't have more than half the capacity of your venue. So I hope that has been clarified. Outdoors, if you have a venue outdoors, you cannot have more than 500 people outdoors. Whether it's a faith gathering, whether it's a social gathering, whether it's a whatever gathering, outdoors, no more than 500. But still at 1.5 meters apart, still with a mask, still with your hand washing, and we must observe all the whole health protocols. And then if we come to the gyms and all those activities that were only allowed 50 people, like the gyms, the health facilities for people who want to exercise and do all those things, there it's only 50% of the venue. 50% of the capacity of the venue. So all those economic activities that only allowed 50 people will now be at 50% of the venue. But other gatherings, weddings and all those, it will be 250 people maximum at 1.5 meters apart. And if you can't do that in your venue, then it will have to be half the capacity of your venue. And then we come to international travel. International travel will be allowed from the 1st of October. International travel in the continent is allowed to all countries and from all countries. But other international travel, there would be a schedule of countries where the infections are high, who will not be allowed temporarily until such time that their infections come under control. But generally, it is allowed, except for those countries who will have high infections. And even for them, it's not permanent. It will depend on what happens to their infections. If they are under control, then they will also be allowed. So visa applications in our embassies will now be allowed. The long-term visas will be re-established. So the long-term visas people can then use from the 1st of October. The land borders, there were 18 land borders that were open, and they were open mainly for cargo, but now they'll be open for everything, for movement of people, for tourists, for everyone. The 18 land borders. The 35 land borders that were closed will remain closed. So we're just opening the 18 fully so that they can take traffic for tourists, for people who are coming for anything. So we must just remember that we must use the 18 borders that are open. When it comes to international airports, it will only be the three airports: OR Tambo, King Shaka, and Cape Town. Those are the three international airports that are going to be open. The commercial seaports will be open. All the commercial seaports will be open, but they will not be open for passengers, for tourism. These cruise ships and so on, those are still not allowed to offload people on our shores. The domestic travel will remain the same. The buses, the taxis, long distance. Long distance is still 200 k's, and the wearing of masks, the percentage will remain the same. But the ministers will do the direction so that people are clear. The other things that we want to stress is, of course, that when we travel, we must observe the curfew when we move around. There is still the curfew. Remember that at level 5, we were under a 24-hour curfew. And then the hours of the curfew have been diminishing with the levels. At this level, level 1, the curfew will start at 1 minute past midnight and end at 4 in the morning. So there's fewer hours of the curfew compared to where we were at level 5. So, and of course, everything will be looked at from time to time. I'll just remind you of the few things that are still not permitted. There are very few now. It's night vigils. It's the borders that I talked about, the 35 borders which are still closed. It's the nightclubs. They are still closed. The initiation schools are still closed, but we'll be discussing those matters with the traditional leaders. But for now, they are still closed. The passenger ships for international leisure are still closed, as I said. Sports spectators are still not allowed. International sports is still not allowed. So, and then education, the education ministers will always deal with that in the directions.